Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today, let's talk about topwater fishing during the summer. For most people, including myself, summertime and topwater are kind of synonymous. And, everybody thinks about the warmer months of the year when they think about topwater. And, I'm no different. When the water temps start getting into the 70s, that's when I really start thinking about throwing a lot of topwaters. But there's certain topwater baits that tend to get my favor this time of year, and that's because you've essentially got two different kind of classes of fish this time of year. You've got the fish that are staying ultra shallow. They may be the minority, but there's still plenty of fish that are really, really shallow. In fact, sometimes dirt shallow. And then you've got a group of fish that is out deep, that are chasing, more pelagic type bait fish out deep. And so using topwaters that appeal to both categories of fish are kind of the name of the game during the summertime. So first off, let's talk about those fish that are out deep, that are they're really hyper focused on pelagic bait fish like shad, and they're holding on more traditional main lake structures. So one of my favorite types of structures for summertime topwater fishing, it's got to be long tapering points. Okay, I'm not talking about one of those points that is it's obvious on the map that it's a point, but it drops very, very quickly in the deep water. I'm talking about those points that just seem to almost be more like shoals than points. They just go out for a very, very long period of time and they taper very, very slowly. Those are some of my favorite types of structures on pretty much any reservoir because bass just love to use those as great ambush points, to really condense those bait fish from deeper water into shallow water and to feed in that way. And because those points are generally, fairly shallow, relatively shallow, the bass that live on them are very, very susceptible to topwaters. They're willing to go 10 foot, up to the surface or even more to attack a bait. And so to start with, this is probably my absolute favorite topwater bait in general during the summer, but definitely for those more offshore structure-oriented fish that are feeding on big schools of shad. I like to throw a walking topwater bait. So this one right here is a Yozuri. I actually like this one a lot. This is a really good clear water walking bait, and it makes a lot of noise. It's got a good casting system in it, good weight transfer system. It's got a lot of shine to it. That's one of the things Yozuri does pretty good, is they add a lot of like prism colors and things like that. But I really like this one, but I'm not just limiting it to this one specific bait. This category includes, the good old Zara Spook. You can do like a Vixen here. Vixen is a really, really well-known and popular bait that actually they stopped production of it and then they restarted it later on. I think that's the gist of the story of the Vixen, but a very, very popular walking bait. But walking baits in general, so essentially what you're doing with these baits, if you haven't fished them before, is you're casting them long distances. They really can cast like a rocket, and you're using the rod tip to slap a little bit of slack into the line. So you're popping the rod and kind of, taking the slack out real quick and then lifting the rod so it gives that slack back. And what that does is it creates this bait action where it goes side to side to side. And so that's kind of the key to fishing these baits, is figuring out that technique that allows this bait to just walk very cleanly side to side. And the reason why this is such a good, like, long tapering structure, long points, humps, shoals, river bars, things like that, is that you can cover a ton of water with it. You essentially are making these long casts and just walking it all the way back. You don't have to like slowly work this bait. It's actually better if you work it very quickly and just keep it moving. And then once you start getting some fish that come up and maybe hit at it and maybe they miss it, then you can kind of manipulate the movement of this bait to appeal to individual fish that may need a little bit extra, coaxing to attack this bait. But walking baits are an excellent choice during the summer when you're fishing offshore. Great way to cover a lot of water and get some really big strikes. Now, if I'm fishing an area that still has tapering structure, and I just want a bait that I can cast out there and reel back and not have to add a lot of action. Sometimes my hand, my wrist will kind of start getting fatigued throwing a walking bait all day. I might want to pick up something like a whopper plopper, or one of these choppos. These type of baits with this kind of almost buzzbait type of tail, this spinning tail that gurgles and pops and creates a lot of a big bubble trail. These type baits are really good for still fishing fairly deeper water. They actually have a lot of drawing power up to the surface. That's why you see a lot of guys that fish this style whopper plopper bait, in like the Ozarks, those deeper, clearer lakes. A lot of fish on Table Rock and other lakes in that area, Beaver. A lot of people will fish these even though they're fishing around fish that are kind of laying in those deeper depth zones. It's because those fish will draw up and attack this bait. This is another great option for structure fishing and just covering water. It's also really good for just getting on the shoreline and going. Because it doesn't fatigue you. You just essentially cast it out, reel it back in. It does all the work. And so this is another good one for, when I'm kind of more on main lake oriented stuff. But then you start getting into those fish, those groups of fish that are still really shallow. They may be in pockets, maybe, oriented around the bluegill spawn, bluegill beds. They may be around docks. There's always going to be a group of fish that lives very shallow. They may be just, resident fish. And for those fish, there's a group there's a type of bait that really has got a lot of success for me in the last probably 10 years that I really didn't think about prior. I always, whenever I thought about a prop bait, I would think about Florida fishing. I'd think about a good old devil's horse. I got a bunch of those, and I'd fish them in the spring on grass lines. But there's also another subset of prop baits which have a wider body. This right here is the Kelly J. Jr. This is the Lucky Craft version, essentially very similar to what you would expect from a prop bait. It's got two props, one on either end, but it's a little bit different than, say, the Devil's Horse, which is long and narrow. This one is actually wide. It's almost perfectly shaped like a bluegill, a small panfish. It's also shaped just like a shad too, so it can imitate both a shad and bluegill. But this bait right here is a very good imitator of just something that a bass wants to eat in general up shallow, and what they're already targeting, which is primarily bluegill when you're dealing with ultra shallow summertime bass. And so this one right here is a really killer option. The difference with this versus the other ones that I just talked about is the fact that the walking bait and the plopper, those all allow you to move very, very quickly and to cover large expanses very fast. This bait right here, these little wide body prop baits, are not a bait that you're going to cover a ton of water with. Yes, you can work this bait very fast and you could probably have some success with it, but really where I have the most success with these type of prop baits is casting them out around, you know, shallow cover, or where I think that there's a bluegill bed going on. You know, and then I cast it out there, I rip it once, I pull it towards me, maybe, you know, 18 inches, 2 feet or something like that, and then let it sit. And you let all of those ripples disappear around the bait before you make the next little pop. And it's more of like, it's not like a hard pop like you would with maybe a popper style bait or a chugger style bait. It's more of a you know, a quick pull of the rod tip to make this bait, you know, move forward and to spin these little blades. Okay, and then you pause it and let it sit. So it is a little bit more of a methodical type presentation where you're kind of, you know, taking your time with it and really trying to appeal to the you know, the fish up shallow that are looking for an easy meal like this. And so, you know, it's a little bit different to fish, but it is super, super effective this time of year. And in fact, you go back and watch old tournament footage during late summertime, you know, like old FLW Cups and tournament footage like that. You will see a lot of prop baits secretly doing well. You'll notice a lot of guys throwing those type of wide-bodied prop baits and just, you know, doing very, very well, making top 10s, things like that, even winning tournaments. And for a long time, that was actually a really well-kept secret that a lot of guys didn't talk about, was those little prop baits there. Other than that, I need to throw in an honorable mention, because this is a bait that I'm really still trying to learn and figure out where it is going to excel. And it's because it's such a new bait. It was introduced at ICAST last year. I've talked a little bit about it. And it's, you know, there's been a lot of guys that have caught a lot of fish on them, but I still think that everybody's trying to figure out where it fits the best. But that is the Hellraiser from Z-Man. This right here is a super unique topwater bait. You have the line tie right here. It's got this kind of like pencil popper style body, but then you've got a chatterbait blade on the back. So it creates a lot of vibration and has a very, very hectic, you know, panicked kind of a side-to-side movement when it comes to the main body. So it pairs a lot of good vibration, like a ton of vibration, and a good panicked action on the surface that really does imitate a freaked out bait fish. But this bait right here, I think, is going to really play the biggest up in very shallow water. Okay, that's where I've had the most success so far. It's done extremely well on river type fishery. So if you're going to a natural river or tidal fishery, this bait right here, especially if you get one in black. Black seems to be a really good color for those tidal and river fisheries, but that's where I've had the most success so far, is in those natural type scenarios during the summertime. So this is actually one of my favorite things to pick up for those natural fisheries. We've talked about, you know, reservoirs, and, you know, this isn't my favorite bait for, you know, structure fishing, like with the whopper plopper and the walking bait. But when it comes to shallow fish, this is really done well. And if it's super dingy, one of the things that this bait does really well is it has that vibration, that killer vibration, because of that blade on the back. And so it's allowed me to really catch more fish in very, very dirty water, which I think is cool. But still trying to figure out you know, some other scenarios where this bait excels, but it really is a cool bait, and it's worth, you know, experimenting with on a fishery that you've already tried with other type of topwater baits. Well, anyways, that is pretty much it. Those are my favorite topwater baits for the summertime. I start getting into more other different types of topwaters, maybe more buzz baits and stuff back once it starts transitioning into the fall, poppers. And for me, poppers, as popular as they are, I really like poppers immediately after the spawn, and during the bluegill spawn for sure. But for straight summertime fishing, where you're kind of on the tail end of the bluegill spawn, and you're dealing with more with small wolf packs of fish up shallow, and those structure oriented fish, these are the ones that I really like to rely on year in and year out. But anyways, guys, let me know what your thoughts are. Are there any baits that you would add to this list that you like to throw during the summertime? And just make sure if you have any questions, drop a comment below. Thank you for watching. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. Trust the process. I'm going to see you out on the water.